Jesse Lee Peterson. Boy, I didn't think I'd actually have any cause to make another video to you, but after I made the first one, I went through and I kind of saw some of the other things that you stand behind. It's very clear to me now that you clearly see that the way to get power is to pander to the white conservatives and be one of them, or at least talk like one of them. You actually think that you thank God for slavery in America. You think it's a good thing that the slaves were, that people, free people in Africa were taken against their will, and many of them died horribly on the ship rides over here, and basically deprived of every right they had as human beings. You think that's great also that people like you can exist now and enjoy this delusion that you have, that you're as good as these bigots that really wish you would go back to whatever cave you crawled from. Whatever. They don't. I said it in my last video, so I'll try not to repeat myself, but your ignorance is showing. It kind of is a good thing, because it shows me that you're just as stupid about your own people and your own history as you are about women. I used to be very naive too. I watched Roots. I watched Queen. I had a pretty good idea, I thought, of how it was, and it angered me a great deal. But one time, I think I saw some show on Black History, Channel 9. You have Black History Month. I don't know if it's that way all over the country, but we have that here, or at least we used to. And I saw a story that was just absolutely stomach-churningly gross. So, I did some research. I went online and I looked up the atrocities that were committed against black people during the time of slavery and also after. And absolutely horrible. I remember there was one story about a man who was set on fire. I don't remember what his crime was. I think he might have looked at a white woman. He was set on fire, and he kept trying to get out of the fire, and they kept pushing him back in the fire, and he had pieces of himself falling off while he was trying to escape the flames. And finally he just collapsed in the fire, and that's a lovely story. I also read something about people being caught, runaways being caught, and they used corkscrews on them and pulled out corkscrew pieces of flesh from people, using hot pokers and basically red hot pokers, and basically burning out people's eyes, putting it down their throats, putting it up their ass, for the horrible crime of trying to get away from the brutality that they were put in, slavery. Anyway, that's as much of the gross stuff. I won't talk about the poor kid who had, I think he had maybe dated or was caught kissing a white girl, and he had his fingers and ears and toes cut off, and he was roasted slowly for a half hour in front of a cheering crowd of people. And you're grateful to white people for what happened to your people. And it wasn't even that long ago. A lot of people go, oh, well, that was just so long ago. Well, Nazi Germany was not that long ago, and the slaves, the time of the slaves when people were treated like property and livestock, wasn't really that long ago. So it just blows my mind that you could have this attitude, and it's clearly just to be one of the boys, trying to be one of the boys. That's all it is. Something I saw, or I found online, the life as a slave was very difficult. Here are some things that were in a slave's life. I imagine this is more like a normal, everyday, ordinary slave who doesn't run away and doesn't end up horribly tortured and killed, well, at least some of them. Every year, slaves usually received 2 linen shirts, 2 pairs of trousers, 1 jacket, 1 pair of socks, 1 pair of shoes, an overcoat, and a wool hat. Slaves usually received cornmeal, salt herrings, and 8 pounds of pork or fish each month for food. Housing. Slaves' houses were usually wooden shacks with dirt floors, but sometimes houses were made of boards, nailed up with cracks stuffed with rags. The beds were collected pieces of straw or grass and old rags, and only one blanket for a covering. A single room could have up to a dozen people, men, women, and children. Childhood. When a slave was only 12 months old, her mother could be sold far away. When a slave was 4, they sometimes worked as a babysitter. When a slave was around the age of 5, they would run errands and carry water to the field slaves. Around the age of 8, children would be expected to work on the plantation. Families. Over 32% of marriages were canceled by masters as a result of slaves being sold away from the family home. A slave husband could be parted from his wife and children from their mothers. Punishments. Slaves could be killed for murder, burglary, arson, and assault upon a white person. That's actually an underestimation from what I've read. Slaves could be killed for looking at somebody the wrong way or saying the wrong thing. Plantation owners believed that this severe discipline would make the slaves too scared to rebel. In South Carolina, one slave owner would put nails in a barrel, sticking out on the inside of the barrel, then put the slave in and roll him or her down a very long and steep hill. Another punishment slave owners used was to whip their slaves. I've read a story about a boy who got to watch his aunt put on a stool with her hands tied over her head, and the master flogged her literally until the blood was streaming down onto the floor. I imagine she died. Okay, what other slave owners in Virginia smoked their slaves. This involved whipping them and putting them in a tobacco smokehouse. Some other punishments were getting beaten with a chair, broom, tongs, shovel, shears, knife handles, the heavy end of a woman's shoes, or an oak club. Religion. One of the main reasons masters didn't want their slaves to become Christians involved the Bible. This was one reason why most plantation owners did what they could to stop their slaves from learning to read. In the South, black people were not usually allowed to attend church services either. Black people in the North were more likely to attend church services. Drums, which were used in traditional religious ceremonies, were banned because overseers worried that they would be used to send messages. Anyway, that's all this site says, but isn't that enough? I mean, forget everything else. Forget about how, I mean, the worst stories, I kind of described some of the things. I mean, and then after slavery, was it really any better? How long before people were able to crawl their way out of that? How much potential was lost? People that might have become doctors or scientists or great men and women, but because they weren't allowed to read, they weren't allowed to educate themselves, they weren't allowed to do anything but the most menial work. You know, they never got to be what they might have become because of this disgusting prejudice and bigotry in America. And you support it. You think it's great. You thank God for all the wonderful torture and murder and suffering and dehumanization and degradation that were done to your own people. You thank God for that, so you could be sitting there now and have the audacity to say what you say. Again, Uncle Tom, in every respect. You say that women should be ashamed of themselves. Oh my God. You should be ashamed of yourself. You have absolutely no business saying what you do. but it's all just obviously for, excuse me, self-serving reasons, and most people can see through that. At least I hope they can.